The United States and the European Union are set to hammer out a major economic pact, which could create the world's largest free trade zone. The deal will certainly have global implications, but there are conflicting opinions on which countries will actually emerge as winners. RT's Andrew Farmer has been investigating the potential repercussions.
So on the face of it, this trade deal sounds like a win-win situation for the US and the EU. It would simplify trade regulations between the two, and doing business across the Atlantic would become easier. And some experts predict their economies would each enjoy a $100 billion boost every year as a result. So it sounds like a no-brainer, but it would also create losers within the EU. Economists warn trade between EU countries would shrink as American products gain a foothold. The UK and Germany would benefit overall, according to the IFO Institute, a think tank based in Munich. But France wouldn't gain much, and Luxembourg would actually lose out. Well, winners and losers will also emerge on the global stage. Chile and Mexico rely heavily on the US market, but could be edged out by European competition. Other countries which might suffer a similar fate are Canada, Australia and Japan, while West African nations supplying Europe could find themselves unable to compete with American products. Creating the world's biggest trade bloc will reap economic benefits overall for the US and EU, but it will also redraw the economic map on an international level, and that won't help everyone. However, there is still a long way to go before it becomes a reality. Hammering out a deal will not be straightforward, with many differences on hundreds of issues to be settled on either side of the Atlantic. Agriculture is one such hurdle. The US and EU have had epic trade battles over hormone-treated beef to genetically modified organisms, and reaching an agreement on what can and can't be sold will be difficult. It's the same case for the car industry. America and Europe have different safety regulations, and the question is, can they find enough common ground? So there are complicated issues to resolve, although it is hoped some form of agreement can be reached by the end of 2014.
Now, the free trade talks between the U.S. and EU come at a time when Western economic leadership is facing a tough challenge from emerging markets. Financial analyst Patrick Young earlier told my colleague Kevin Owen that the pact could bring major benefits.
A big free trade agreement between two huge trading superpowers will be good for the world. It will help create jobs throughout the planet Earth.
And how's it going to tip the balance? In recent years, we've seen it's the emerging economies that have been doing best, that have been doing well and coming out. Is that going to change? And is it going to tip the balance in any shape or form?
It's not going to change fundamentally the wonderful benefit of free trading emerging nations that have been coming up throughout the world. However, it is an incredible opportunity for the frankly currently awful European Union predicament economically to manage to fight back. It gives these two established power blocs an opportunity to continue their own growth path, but obviously the whole point about these sorts of free trade agreements is they're growing out of the idea of creating global free trade and a faster growth rate for everybody. The emerging nations of the world, they're the benchmarks in how to do exports right now. They're going to continue to grow whether this free trade agreement happens or not. The problem is, for USA and particularly for Europe, they are looking at going backwards in the world if they don't manage to come together and do a free trade agreement. There are obviously a lot of vested interests here, which is going to make it very difficult to deliver a deal. But ultimately, the President of the United States of America and the European Union cannot afford, in the current economic circumstance where their lunch is being eaten by the emerging East, not to come up with a deal.